Merry Christmas, everybody. And you know what feels like Christmas to me? An off-season on NBA 2K25. And today we recap the most recent one we did on stream. Starting off the off-season, we had some very important updates to the appearance of our players, as McKnight would get a little bit of facial hair added to him. And coming off a rough playoff series, Albert Ellis would get himself a new look, going a little bit darker with the hair, also ditching the mohawk in favor of maybe a little bit more of a mature look. And Clayton Rodman would decide to grow out his hair a little bit more than he has in the past. We'd get the offseason underway with some very important retirements, including Damian Lillard and Kawhi Leonard, as well as the center mentor GOAT in Andre Drummond. In major news around the league, we would get a big-time adjustment to the rules with Saramago fouling out with 6 minutes to go in Game 7 of the playoffs. They've increased the number required to foul out by 1. So that got us to the offseason officially, and there were two big-time trains of thought heading into this offseason. Either we keep the core of this team together, and we try to improve off of the bench using the contracts of guys like Lonzo Ball and Josh Green to move into this class and just improve around the edges. That was one scenario. The other was that we shake things up and move off of Jaylen Duren, who is a player that I really like his skill sets, but it has become a question of how well he fits with the three young guns that we've drafted so far in this series. And it was a very tough decision for me. Ultimately, when it came to the draft, coming up at the number 4 pick, the decision finally needed to be made. It's a decision I've been waffling over for so long in the series, but ultimately I think we had a scenario that was just too good to pass up. The Pelicans here are a pretty veteran team that's, despite picking in the top 5, probably felt like they were a little bit ready to win now with their roster. They just needed probably an upgrade at center. And so we were going to offer Jaylen Duren in exchange for the 4th round pick. While that alone was not able to get it done, the lowly addition of a 2nd round pick in the future would be the difference here in this trade. And ultimately, we had to say goodbye to Jaylen Duren. I just think with so many of our top end players, Albert Ellis and Ayrton Saramago first come to mind, thriving in the paint, we needed to free up some space in that area. And so it was time to move on from Jaylen Duren, and the team would select a little bit of a surprise to everybody in chat, perhaps, in Rudolph Garrett, overtaking a replacement center in his stead. Rudolph Garrett, being a 6'9", 250-pound wing, offered the one thing that I felt like this team lacked. Maybe the biggest theme of the entire season last year is that when Saramago was off the court, the scoring just wasn't good enough, and we needed another shot creator. That was a theme throughout the entire season, and that's exactly what Rudolph Garrett provides. He may not have the potential you're looking for in a top 5 pick. He had projected the worst potential out of anybody in the top 6 in this class, but in a situation here in Vancouver where we wouldn't ask him really to be anything other than maybe the 3B option or the 4th option on the team, high potential isn't really what we need out of him. What we need is a bucket getter. And that's exactly what Rudolph Garrett is. Also showed a great ability and eagerness to attack in transition, which is a great match for the Lamont Powers playstyle here in Vancouver. And it just seemed too good to pass up on. So with the number 4 pick in the class, the Vancouver Blizzard would select Rudolph Garrett and add him to this young core that they've been collecting over the last several seasons in the draft. Well, where did that leave the center position for this team, though? That was the major question following this surprise pick. And worst case scenario, We could have Victor Jackson start at center next year. He would provide the spacing that we're looking for at the center spot now. The only real concern there is his inside defense at C+ is not starting center worthy. I didn't think there was a very strong center class though, and I felt confident that with Lonzo Ball and Josh Green being two players that we were looking to trade for a while now, we could get one of these centers on the board. With the 6th pick, the Washington Wizards would select Michael Graham, 7-foot center, 281 pounds. And he was kind of the final player in this top 6 of the draft to go. A great rebounder here with excellent strength and size. He had some shooting ability, which he was able to showcase a little bit in the game that we watched, though not to a major degree. This was the player that the Vancouver Blizzard had their hopes set for. Not sure if Lonzo Ball and Josh Green can get you this caliber of player. We have the 28th pick that we can throw in there as well, but with Walker Kessler already on this Washington Wizards team, it was time to at least attempt to see if we could make this trade. The Wizards don't have any point guards above 75 overall, so Lonzo Ball would be by far their best option on the squad, and that would be enough to get the job done. Trading away Jaylen Duren, Josh Green, and Lonzo Ball to add 2 high-end rookies to this squad. Now, that out of the top 6 in this class, they were the 2 lowest potential players, but they have the 2, I think, best fitting skill sets with what we already had. Again, it's not like I didn't think potential was important at all, but for me, it wasn't at the top of my mind. I was looking for skill sets that fit with what we already have. I think we have the high potential players in this roster already that are going to be the leaders in Saramago and Albert Ellis. And so to me, it's finding perfect fits. And I think Rudolph Garrett is pretty much a perfect fit. Michael Graham may not fit my definition of perfect, but he's, I think, a much better fit than Jaylen Duren was, even if we take a hit to overalls for our first year. Best of all, we didn't even need to give up the 28th pick in the class to make these moves, so I still had a player that could perhaps replace Josh Green on the mind here, and that player was Mitch Parker, who didn't have a ton of potential, but he did have a boom potential that intrigued me and a day one skill set. Unfortunately, he would go with the 14th pick to the Atlanta Hawks, which was way above our pick range. So at pick 28, I was looking for some potential, maybe to hopefully coax the Hawks into trading Mitch Parker for a guy who had higher potential. So that decision really came down to Brian Sampson and Omer Ozat. Sampson had the higher potential of the two, but out of the two, Omer Ozat was the guy that, in case we couldn't make the trade, I wanted to have his skill set a little bit more than Sampson. I feel like we're really good at the 4 with Saramago and Leonard Miller. But right after making the trade, I would check in on the Hawks to see if they would rather have the potential of Ozat over their player that they selected. Didn't think this had a high likelihood of success, but if it did, I would much rather have Parker myself. Unfortunately, the Hawks were good with who they selected at 14. After the draft, we take a look at their ratings here. Rudolph Garrett starting with A+ three-pointer, B+ perimeter defense, and interior scoring, and B playmaking is a great spot. Solid IQ and athleticism as well, but that potential is below average. Again, I knew that would probably be the case coming in. I was expecting maybe average potential rather than below average. But looking at it, it's probably around like an 83. So he still has some room to grow and become a really quality starter. Michael Graham, on the other hand, A rebounding, B post defense, B+ inside scoring for him. And he does have C 3-point shooting, which of course isn't game-changing by any means, but it's much better than Jaylen Duren and gives us a chance to have 5 at least semi-shooting threats on the court at the same time, opening the lanes for Saramago and Albert Ellis. His potential looking somewhere around kind of that 86 range, which would put him pretty close to Jaylen Duren. I think that was about as good of a replacement as we could have asked for. And then Omer Ozat here, going to be just a defensive specialist, but that potential is looking solid here, probably like an 83 or an 84. So someone that could either come off the bench or be a trade chip for us in the future. Heading into free agency now, we had quite a few options to think about, but most of them were pretty easy. Would decide to keep Christie and Hardy. Those were the two that were kind of actual decisions. When it comes to free agency, obviously in a draft-only franchise, the options are limited, but we do have some mentors to take care of here. And the first guy we'd go after is Jimmy Butler. 38 years old, but he's still got some really nice badges on him, so we would try to beat that Miami Heat offer. Next up would be Marcus Smart. Still has a lot of nice defensive badges on him for a guard. Luke Cornett was the best option available after the Sonics sniped the best center mentor. And then lastly, we'd go after Malcolm Brogdon here, another guard mentor, trying to get Rodman some badges. And then we had to get one more player to a two-way contract just to fill out the draft-only eligible roster. Perhaps the biggest step of the offseason, though, would be the player progression screen, and we saw some major developments on this roster. Ayrton Saramago is now the second highest overall player in all of basketball. We already knew he was up there winning, being runner-up to the MVP award last year, but now just flush with gold badges all on his player card. 32 badges for him is just an insane amount, considering that they lowered the amount of badges in 2K25 compared to previous games. I think it's like 40 badges compared to like 50 something in previous games. So he has 80% of the badges, and a lot of them are gold and silver. Albert Ellis, though, goes up to 25 badges from 17, 8 new badges, also goes up 6 overall to a 92. A lot of his badges have upgraded to silver. He got the very important set shot specialist to bronze. Want to see that get to silver for sure, but I think Albert Ellis could be in play for a really big year. Surprisingly, we would get a +3 upgrade to Cameron McKnight as well on the board. After last year, it was looking like he was perhaps capping out, but that doesn't seem to be the case anymore. He might be hitting his boom ceiling rather than his average potential, and I think that strong playoff matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder could have a lot to do with that. The next guy that had kind of a big offseason would be Clayton Rodman, who goes up 6 overall and now has 8 badges to his name. He's going to be expected to come in and replace the Lonzo Ball role, so a lot more will be expected of him this season, and I think, it's not going to be perfect by any means, but I think he's in a lot better position to be at least fairly productive. If he can at least be as good as Lonzo Ball was scoring, which is a pretty low bar if you consider what Lonzo shot for most seasons with just 40% from the field. If he can hit that number, I think we'll be in a good spot there, and that puts us in a spot where not only do we have some 290 plus overall players now, including a 97, but our entire rotation is at least 77 overall. So for the first time in this series, even the bottom of our bench, at least the guys that will play for us, is looking solid. We're not kind of playing any guys who, in normal circumstances should probably not be in an NBA rotation. Everybody has a skill set that should be able to contribute on our team. Victor Jackson also got some nice badges, although he didn't really progress overall wise. But hopefully the badges can help him. I think the team is looking better. We might have reduced our chances to win the championship in this upcoming season with the trades that we made. Losing an 88 overall center is no joke by any means. But if you're looking at, the 2030s, and it seems crazy to already be talking about the 2030s, I think this offseason is going to be something that we can look back on as, the points on the the graph where we started to see that exponential growth in terms of how good this team was. And, I think we could have ultimately won the championship with Jaylen Duren, with the progression that we saw from Albert Ellis. I think he's ready to be a number 2 here this season. I sincerely hope he is. But I think we're going to be more of a threat in the long run, year by year by year, with this current roster construction. We need the young guys to develop, of course. If they end up being busts, that's going to hurt us. And that was the risk that we took. But I think it was definitely a risk that was worth it. As we wrap up this offseason recap, I just wanted to show you the biggest move elsewhere around the league for this season, and it would be the Sacramento Kings adding Zion Williamson and Cody Williams. Their depth still sucks, but there you have it. Thanks for watching this offseason recap. The next season will be starting soon, and I'll see you then. Bring the Blizzard.